The galaxy had grown complacent. The great federations and empires had known centuries of peace under their so-called unified accord. They believed violence was a relic of the past, something only primitive species indulged in. And when humanity joined, fragile and new to the stars, they saw us as quaint, a sentimental, emotional race too quick to forgive. They mistook mercy for weakness. When the tragedy began, it wasn't declared a war. It was a containment action, a bureaucratic euphemism for extermination. A human colony on Epsilon Theta was erased, 200,000 souls burned to ash when the XYR Dominion decided to test a new atmospheric weapon. The Federation called it an unfortunate misunderstanding. They promised an investigation, a tribunal, and reparations. But the Dominion never apologized. They smiled, bowed, and waited for us to forgive. For 6 months, humanity stayed silent. We attended the meetings, signed the condolences, and mourned our dead. The other species thought we were grieving in peace. They didn't understand that humans never stop at mourning. We plan, we build, and we remember. The day the Federation closed the case, declaring the matter resolved, was the day Earth's skies went black with departing fleets. We called it Operation Firebreak. Every ship launched without fanfare, without broadcast. The stars above Terra dimmed as thousands of engines roared into the void. To outsiders, it looked like humanity was withdrawing from the galaxy, retreating into isolation. That illusion lasted just long enough for our fleets to vanish from the sensors, then came the silence. Communication relays near XYRR space began to fail. Merchant ships reported seeing burning worlds on the horizon. The Dominion called it terrorism. The Federation called for restraint. Humanity didn't call at all. When the first Dominion capital world went dark, the galactic networks erupted. Billions watched as their screens flickered with strange symbols, lines of fire across the sky, recorded from orbit. The symbols formed words in an ancient Terran tongue. Later, the translators confirmed what every human already knew. It said, "We remember." No declaration of war was ever transmitted. No ultimatums, no negotiations. Just the thunder of orbital bombardments and the eerie silence that followed. Cities that once glittered across continents were reduced to molten glass. Human ships moved like ghosts, appearing and vanishing from hyperspace without trace. The Federation convened an emergency summit, demanding explanations. Earth's representative appeared, not in person, but as a holographic projection. Ambassador Lian wore black, her expression carved in iron. When the XYRR delegate shouted accusations, she simply replied, "You asked us for forgiveness." We decided to answer in our native language. They tried to fight back. The Dominion's fleets, once considered unmatched, vanished into ruin. Human warships didn't duel honorably, they hunted. They jammed enemy comms, turned their supply lines to ashes, and dropped kinetic rods through atmosphere with terrifying precision. Every strike was surgical. Every target was connected to the massacre on Epsilon Theta. The galaxy watched in horror as the Dominion begged for mercy. But there was no mercy left to give. The message was not vengeance, it was a warning. When the firestorms ended, humanity broadcast one final transmission from the ruins of the Dominion's capital. A single phrase, carved into the scorched ground by orbital bombardment, "Never again." After that, no human ship fired another shot. The fleets returned home. The Federation, shaken and terrified, tried to convene another tribunal. But no one dared accuse us. Every ambassador could still see the reflection of burning worlds in their eyes years past. The Dominion was gone, its systems sterilized, its survivors scattered. Humanity resumed trade, rebuilt colonies, and extended hands once again. The other races couldn't comprehend it. How could we return to peace after such fury? They didn't realize that forgiveness and fire are both part of who we are. Children on alien worlds grew up whispering the story of the humans, the ones who smiled when they were wronged, and burned when they were betrayed. Priests called us cursed, soldiers called us legends, and scholars called us necessary. When a pirate fleet threatened the border worlds decades later, they surrendered upon detecting human transponders. Not because of what they saw, but because of what they remembered. They'd heard the tales of what happens when humanity stops forgiving. The Federation quietly rewrote its charter, forbidding any aggression toward a recognized human settlement. No one protested. Every species knew the cost of testing that line. They called it the Fire Treaty. Even now, centuries later, the remnants of XYRR's world still glow faintly from orbit, a scar across the stars. The historians call it a tragedy. The soldiers call it justice. Humanity calls it the day the galaxy learned the difference between forgiveness and weakness. When future generations asked what message we sent that day, the veterans would simply look toward the night sky, where the faint red shimmer of those ruined worlds still burned. And they would whisper, "We wrote our message in fire, so they'd never forget our words." Long after the flames cooled and the ashes settled, the galaxy's maps changed. The former XYRR Dominion space was marked as Restricted Zone, Quarantine Level 7. No one went there anymore, not because of radiation, but because of memory. Travelers said their sensors picked up whispers, transmissions looping endlessly in human code, repeating that same phrase, "We remember." In the years that followed, humanity didn't expand recklessly. We grew quietly, methodically. Every colony bore a monument, black stone, etched with the names of Epsilon Theta's fallen. Children learned the story not as propaganda, but as heritage. It was a reminder that peace is precious only when it's protected. The Federation sent diplomats, scientists, and theologians to understand us. They wanted to know what made a species capable of such compassion and such destruction in the same breath. Their reports always came back the same: humans feel deeply. And that is both their greatest gift and their greatest weapon. Our technology advanced beyond anything we'd shown before. The fleet's tactics, refined in silence, became legend in military academies across the galaxy. Alien strategists studied our campaigns and found no randomness. Every target, every strike, was deliberate. The war hadn't been rage. It had been resolve. Meanwhile, survivors from the Dominion were given sanctuary, not by their own allies, but by humanity. Those who surrendered were treated, fed, and educated. The galaxy struggled to reconcile that paradox. How could the species that burned worlds also heal their enemies' children? But that was the point. The fire was never about hate. It was about a promise kept. Decades later, a historian named Tivar of the Vren Collective visited Earth. He stood at the Epsilon Memorial and asked a veteran why humans had stopped when they could have taken more. The old soldier, his uniform faded but his eyes still sharp, answered simply, because the message was delivered. Anything more would have been noise. The galaxy eventually stabilized. Trade resumed, colonies flourished, and the Federation grew stronger, though now its laws bore silent human fingerprints. Clauses about retribution, defense rights, and moral accountability all traced back to those dark days. Humanity had reshaped the galactic conscience not through diplomacy, but through the memory of what they'd unleashed, and yet, among the stars, stories persisted. Rumors of fleets hidden in deep voids, of orbital stations manned by silent sentinels, waiting. Some believed they were myths, human ghost fleets, maintained to remind the galaxy that peace endures only under the watch of those willing to defend it. When new species emerged from the dark, they were warned, never strike first at Earth. Never mistake their kindness for frailty. The younger races laughed, at first. But one look at the scarred remains of the Dominion's homeworld silenced every joke. Even the oldest empires began adopting a new diplomatic phrase: "Let's not awaken the fire." It became part of galactic etiquette, half superstition, half survival instinct. Humanity didn't need to threaten anyone anymore. The memory of what we were capable of had already done that for us. Still, not all among the stars feared us. Some admired us. They saw in humanity the reflection of their own lost courage, the will to stand against injustice, even when the universe called for silence. Ambassadors began to say openly, humanity taught us that forgiveness has meaning only when there is the power to enforce it. 100 years after Epsilon Theta, a delegation gathered on the old Dominion capital, now renamed New Dawn. The survivors, the descendants of those who once destroyed and those who once died, came together under one banner, the banner of humanity's lesson. And there, they lit torches, flame after flame, across the blackened plains. Not to burn, but to remember. The ceremony was broadcast across every known system. Billions watched as human and alien hands together wrote in light across the night sky, "Never again." And for the first time in galactic history, those words meant something more than fear. They meant unity. Humanity didn't gloat. We didn't boast. We stood quietly among the crowd, our uniforms simple, our faces calm. We had no desire to be conquerors. We had already learned what it cost to send a message in fire. But we would never allow anyone to forget why it had to be written. When a young alien student asked an Earth ambassador how humanity could carry such a burden and still smile, she replied, "Because hope is the other side of fire." We burn to be remembered, but we rebuild to be understood. Over centuries, the Firebreak campaign became legend. The details blurred, the strategies lost, but the core truth remained untouched. It became part of the galactic identity, the day humanity changed the stars, not by conquest, but by conviction, and in that conviction, the galaxy found something sacred. The idea that peace is not granted, it is guarded. That forgiveness is not submission, it is strength. And that humanity, for all its flaws, would always be the keeper of both. Now, when travelers pass through the ruins of old XYRR space, they often report strange lights drifting through the atmosphere, tiny embers dancing in the dark. Scientists say it's just ionized particles reacting to magnetic storms. But the old veterans know better. They say it's the fire that remembers. The message that never fades. The whisper in the void that says, for all time they thought we would forgive. Instead, we taught them what our forgiveness costs.